5 facts about sugar. Hi, welcome to 5 facts. I'm your host, Shaq. Let's jump into it. This one is going to be bittersweet. Fact number 1, sugar changed the entire world. And we'll start in the Caribbean. Why the Caribbean? Because of its tropical climate, fertile volcanic soil, and consistent rainfall, which makes islands like Barbados, Jamaica, Cuba, Saint Domingue, otherwise known as Haiti, ideal for sugar cultivation by the British, Spanish, French, and even the Dutch. The sugar revolution began in the Caribbean in the 1600s and transformed the island, leading to the first slave societies in the Americas. The economic impact of the sugar revolution is massive. At its peak, sugar was called white gold. In Saint Domingue, now Haiti, sugar made that colony the richest French colony and the richest colony in the world, producing 40% of sugar consumed in Europe. By all credible known accounts, the Europeans brought sugarcane farming to the Caribbean. But cane farming and refining was brutal work. In fact, it was deadly work. European powers turned to the transatlantic slave trade on an unimaginable scale. Caribbean and Brazilian sugar plantations became the most profitable and cruelest colonies in history, according to many historians. Historians estimate that 2/3 of all enslaved Africans were brought to sugar-producing regions. Let that sink in. Our modern sweet tooth was built on this foundation. Fact number 2. Okay, so now we have to go a little bit back in time, or in fact, a lot back in time. Sugar's story begins roughly around 8000 BCE in what we now know as New Guinea in South Asia, where people first chewed wild sugarcane for its sweetness, perhaps. But the real breakthrough happened in India around 500 BCE. It was discovered that by crushing the cane and boiling the juice, you could create sugar crystals. And these sugar crystals were, in fact, known as kanda, the root word for candy. Interesting, right? For centuries, it was a rare luxury and medicine trickling west along the Silk Road. Now we'll take a deep dive into how sugar invented modern finance. Yeah, this one is exciting. Picture the early 1600s. In the 1600s, London merchants faced a nightmare. Sugar prices were wildly unpredictable, as were many things in the 1600s. A ship from Barbados or Jamaica could take 6 to 10 weeks to cross the Atlantic. And that's if that ship crossed the Atlantic. By that time, the market could have doubled or the market could have crashed. Plantation owners risked ruin if prices fell. Buyers like bakers and grocers risked bankruptcy if prices spiked. No banks would lend against any sugar future cargo because nobody knew what it would be worth, if anything. Here comes the solution. Quotation to arrive. Close quotation contracts. So around 1630 to 1640, London sugar refiners and West Indian planters began a quiet revolution. They started writing open quotations to arrive close quotation contracts. These agreements allowed you to buy or sell a specific amount of sugar for a set price to be delivered on a future date. Example, 200 hogshead of white sugar delivered at the Thames Dock June 1, 1645 at, let's say, £3 per hundredweight. Why was this revolutionary? Because effectively this was the world's first futures contract. Let's just look at the sugar landscape pre and post the sugar futures market. The price of sugar was only discovered on arrival at the docks before the use of sugar futures contracts. But after sugar futures, prices were set months in advance, defeating things like piracy on the high seas, hurricanes in the West Indies, or just bad business overall. Before the sugar futures, planters gambled on every voyage and buyers faced random shortages and gluts. After the sugar futures, planters could budget and they could borrow and buyers could plan their production more accurately. And here's the most important part. Before the sugar futures, there wasn't really a credit market for sugar. Yes, you could get investment for your plantation in the West Indies, but after the sugar futures era, banks now accepted sugar futures as collateral. But what this did was open up a waterfall of capital for the sugar industry. And of course, there were ripple effects because once the sugar futures worked with sugar, traders inevitably applied this logic to a long list of other commonly traded resources such as coffee, cocoa, rice, cotton, wheat, and corn. And the list goes on. And that's how we have the modern futures market that we know, because by the 1860s, the Chicago Board of Trade had formalized futures for grain, directly copying the principles first tested in muddy London sugar alleys. The modern legacy of all of this is today, the global sugar futures market trades over 100 metric tons annually, mostly on the Intercontinental Exchange, or the ICE. Yeah, a different kind of ice. Every time a candy company like Mars or Hershey's locks in the price for the next year's Halloween chocolate, they're using a tool invented by 17th century London sugar merchants who were probably having just a tot of rum with their morning tea. Even bigger, the birth of paper trading. So, here's the truly wild part. Once the futures existed, merchants realized you never had to actually take delivery of the sugar you purchased. Instead, you could buy a contract, wait for the price to rise, and then sell it to someone else, pocketing the difference, all without touching a single grain of sugar or storing a single hogshead of sugar. Economical masterstroke for business at the time. That was the birth of speculation. And speculation led to what we know as today's hedge funds or option contracts, the entire derivatives market worth hundreds or even thousands of billions of dollars. So the next time you hear about a Wall Street trader making millions on futures, remember, it all started because someone in London wanted to lock in the price of their morning tea sweetener. There we go. Let that one sink in. What could beat sugar from sugarcane? Sugar from sugar beets. In 1806, Britain did something that terrified France more than any battle. They cut off the sugar. France got 100% of its sugar from Caribbean colonies. British warships blocked every ship. Prices went up 400%. We've seen this before. People were hoarding honey like gold. Napoleon's solution? Napoleon offered 1 million francs to anyone who could find a domestic source for sugar. And a forgotten German scientist had the answer, the humble white beet. In 1811, Napoleon forced 80,000 acres of French farmland to grow beets. He built refineries, taught beet chemistry in top universities, and within 2 years, France was making 100 tons of beet sugar. Then they got rid of Napoleon for a while. When Napoleon fell in 1814, everyone went back to cane. But Napoleon, on his return from exile, signed a tariff protecting beet farmers. You have to love Napoleon sometimes, right? The tariff stayed. French chemists made beets sweeter than even sugarcane. And when Britain banned slavery, French beet sugar became the ethical choice. Good business, I suppose. 80% of Europe's sugar now comes from beets, and America also gets 55% of its sugar from beets. The only reason you think sugar comes from cane is the marketing. Napoleon called beets the barbaric root, but that barbaric root outlasted his empire by 200 years. And fact number 5, sugar is the most traveled food on earth. The sugar in your kitchen right now? Yeah. That was probably grown in Brazil or India, shipped across entire oceans, refined in different countries, and then packed in other countries. Then it was flown and then trucked to your local store. By the time that sugar hits your almond latte, guess what? That sugar cube has traveled over 10,000 miles and crossed the equator once, twice, or even 3 times. Your sugar cube has seen more of the world than you have. Let that sink in like a sugar cube into your morning coffee. And that's it, guys. Thank you for watching today. Comment below which fact was perhaps the most surprising or the most interesting or the most useful for you. And see you next time.